Non-duality, not two. Where should we begin? And all the many places we could. Well, the normal state of being, we could say, if you like, the state of being for most people is what could be called duality. And duality means two. So what does it mean to say that the normal state of being is to live in duality? What is that two-ness? Well, it's pretty simple. We could say that it consists of, there is a sense that I am a separate being. This may sound so obvious that it sounds, almost like, well, why is somebody bothering to say that? It is so obvious that I am a separate being. I'm a separate person. That's what I feel myself to be. That's what I obviously am. So we can say, okay, well, that's one thing. What's the other thing? Because duality is two. Well, we could say the other thing is there's a sense that there is an external world through which I move. So we could say there's the sense of me, and I am separate from everything else, which is why this is often called, let's say, living in a state of separation. So the common sense, the usual sense, if you like, for most of us, most of the time, is that I'm a separate being and I move through a world full of objects and things and in which events happen, but perhaps most crucially, this world through which I move is full of other people. And I kind of have to negotiate my life in relationship with these other people. And there are various other, let's say, senses that go with this common experience. And those senses are so common and so usual that I probably never think about them. And if anybody was to ever challenge their reality, I might actually think they were perhaps a little bit mad even. And so this sense that here I am, I exist as a person, goes with certain very obvious things, such as, well, for a start, I move through something called space and something called time. More crucially, perhaps, that second thing, something called time. So I feel like I have a past, if you like. I come from a past. I am here in something called the present, and I am moving towards something called the future. And you could say that that sense of past, present, and future constitutes quite a large part of something else, which is very important, which seems to belong to me. You could say something that I own, which is my story. I, as an individual, move through time from past through the present to the future, enacting my story. And that story is probably going to feel pretty important in some ways. And another thing that I'm likely to be carrying with me, you could say, in this state of separation through this story called my life, another metaphor for it could be, if you like, to say that, there is a movie going on and I am the star of that movie. I am the star of the movie called Richard's Life. So there I am, proceeding from the past through the present to the future. And it's quite possible that something I'll be carrying with me is something called meaning. It's quite likely that living in this state of separation, life as it is, what do I mean by that? Something very simple, sitting here in a chair, the sound of a voice, movement on a screen, a glass of water, the taste of a sip of water. That's what I mean by life itself. Phenomena, if you like, just whatever's happening. It's quite likely that in this state of feeling that I'm a separate person, that's not going to be enough. That's not going to be enough to satisfy me. So I will add to that in one way or other something extremely important called meaning. I will give my life meaning. I mean, after all, what is a movie if it doesn't have, some sort of meaning, some sort of conclusion which is meaningful, to which the hero is moving? So something very important I'll probably be carrying with me is meaning. Now that meaning could come from all sorts of things, all sorts of areas, but it's quite likely to come maybe from a religious belief, from a spiritual belief, from a mystical belief. It doesn't have to, but it's quite likely to. And it will give my life something very, very precious, without which I might fall into depression and despair, who knows, called a purpose. You know, I'm likely to see my life as having purpose, and I'm moving towards the fulfillment of that purpose, whatever it is, you know, ultimately pleasing God or becoming enlightened, or, you know, it could be something much more pragmatic, like, you know, having a bigger house, who knows. Now, the suggestion from here is a very simple one. The suggestion from here is that everything that I've just described is simply a fiction. Everything that I've just described is unreal, except as thoughts, as feelings, as words drifting across the airwaves, if you like, from me to you, although there is no me and you. So the suggestion from here is that everything that I talked about so far is a fiction. It's a fiction that there is a world which is separate from me. It's a fiction that there is a me which is separate from that world. It's even a fiction that there is a me at all. So the challenge from here is that the me does not exist. And certainly it's a fiction that whatever meaning I give to my life, whatever God I might worship, or, you know, whatever philosophy I feel is all-encompassingly important, that these are all fictions. They are stories made up by a mind. I'm going to throw something else in here, a mind that does not actually exist. They're stories which are made up by a mind. Really, the bottom line is, in order to make the pain of feeling separate more bearable. You know, most of us live with the pain of feeling separate, and it's pretty unbearable at times. Not at all times, sometimes it's fun, but at times it can become pretty unbearable. And so to make it bearable, we give our life purpose and meaning. We could say that, you know, purpose and meaning are the painkillers that we take when the headache of being separate becomes too much for us to bear. So if I have a literal headache, I reach for a bottle of aspirin. If I have a metaphysical and metaphorical headache, then I don't know, I reach for Christianity or Buddhism or whatever. That's the suggestion from here. And further, the suggestion from here is that all of that, everything that I've been talking about so far, which seems so solid and so real, and the most solid and the most real part of that, of course, is the sense that I exist as a separate person, that can all collapse. And when it collapses, it is likely to take with it everything that I've just been talking about. It's likely to take with it meaning and purpose and time. It's likely to take from me the reality of my past. It's likely to take from me the reality of the future that I seem to be moving towards. Any story that gives my life meaning is likely to go. I've already talked about time. Something I forgot to throw in, another precious gift that the person has, is free will. I don't know how I could have forgotten to put that one in. I mean, that surely is the most precious gift of all. But if you don't believe that that is the most precious gift of all, just try going up to somebody in a bar and having a conversation, starting a conversation with them about how free will does not exist. It's a very, very fast, easy, quick way to get somebody angry. So as everything collapses, it takes away, if you like, my past, my future, the meaning I have given to my life, sense of free will, purpose. Is this sounding awful? Is this sounding like we are plunging into the absolute ultimate existential despair? Because if it is sounding like that, no. I mean, I can understand why it sounds like that. It kind of can sound like that to the one who lives in separation and still believes in meaning and purpose and free will and time. But it's actually the kind of the opposite, we could say, of a plunge into existential despair. It is a release and a relief, if you like, from all of that. It's the ultimate freedom. I mean, the freedom that we seek, however we seek it, we can't help seeking freedom. We may not think we're seeking freedom. We may think we're seeking a girlfriend or a nice car, but really we're seeking freedom. But we can't imagine that the freedom that we're seeking is really the freedom from the burden of the self. I mean, if we get spiritually switched on, or we become a Buddhist, or we study Advaita or something like that, we might even start understanding intellectually that we are seeking something called freedom from the self. But we can never know what that means. We can never know what it means. The separated individual person can never know what that means. Richard, sitting here as a character, does not know what that means. And yet, when the sense of self collapses, somehow it is possible for these words to come out. These are the words of, I'm not the first person to use this phrase. This is oneness talking to oneness. This is oneness here and oneness there. Oneness in the guise of a character called Richard. Oneness in the guise of characters out there called John or Jim or Pete or Mary or Elizabeth. This is oneness talking to oneness. And these words as they're meant are either heard or they're not heard. And whether they're heard or not heard has nothing to do with who you think you are. You can make no choice about whether these words are heard as they are intended to be heard or not. They are either heard or they are not heard. But that's not something that you as a character can do anything about. I went to meetings on non-duality for a long time, and I heard these words with my ears, but I didn't hear these words, if you see what I mean. Nevertheless, some magnetic attraction kept drawing me back to listen to the words that were utterly incomprehensible to me. And that may be what's happening here. Ramana Maharshi has a phrase for this, which is quoted over and over again. I've quoted it many times, so have many other people. You know, if your head is in the tiger's mouth, then you will be here, or you will be some apparent other place like this, where other words somehow like this are also being spoken. Your presence here has nothing whatsoever to do with who you think you are, has nothing whatsoever to do with any choice that you think you have made. My presence here has nothing to do with any choice that I think I have made. I am not here because, you know, Emerson issued an invitation, and then at 6:30, I looked at my watch and thought I'd better start sitting down now. That might seem to be the case, but it isn't. So the suggestion from here is that this, as with everything else, is simply happening. This is simply what is happening. There's no meaning to it. There doesn't need to be. There's no purpose to it. There doesn't need to be. There's no purpose to anything. When the Pope appears on the balcony of St. Peter's in Rome, there is no purpose to that. It is just happening. It has no more significance and no less significance than me talking to you now, or this sip of water I'm about to take. Nothing is any greater and nothing is any lesser than anything else. Everything is simply what it is. Everything is simply whatever is happening. No meaning, no purpose. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't need to go anywhere. Like other people, I've occasionally tried to sum this up, and like other people, I've failed. But you know, one of the ways I have tried and failed to sum this up is by the simple phrase, this is it, this is enough. It doesn't need to be anything else. We don't need, when this is seen for what it is, it doesn't need meaning and purpose. You don't need meaning and purpose. A tree in the park does not need meaning and purpose to be a perfect tree, and I and you do not need meaning and purpose to be a perfect whatever description we want to use. Character, person if you like, individual if you like, divine puppet, to use somebody else's phrase if you like. So I've no idea whether a word of this made sense or not, but I also know it doesn't matter, except to the mind. Now, if none of that made sense, the mind may be screaming in agony, but it doesn't matter. Because the mind has no purchase here. Nothing that the mind says has any purchase here. And yet, we're going to spend some of the next hour and 3/4, hour and a half, whatever it might be. I have no idea. Maybe it's an hour. It doesn't matter, because this, after all, is the timeless. We'll probably spend some of the next little while, exercising the mind, throwing ideas around, questions and answers and so forth. And that might be interesting. It might not be, but it might be interesting. But it doesn't matter. I think that's enough for an introductory talk.
That was beautiful. Thank you. That was brilliant. I think that's the end of the meeting. I think you've answered every question and there's nothing to ask. It's quite obvious. But I have a question here from YouTube, and I'll get to William. Yoshi asks, how do you deal with difficult situations as a non-dual person?
Oh, wow. I don't know where to start with that. Firstly, I don't want to deconstruct the question too much, but firstly, of course, there's no such thing as a non-dual person. I have no idea what a non-dual person would be. I mean, that is, that is a contradiction in terms. Seeing non-duality is seeing that there is no such thing as a person. So having got that out of the way, maybe if I could, I'll go back and try and deal with the questions I think it was probably intended. Can you just read the first part out again, Emerson?
Yes. How do you deal with difficult situations as a non-dual person?
Yeah, well, of course, I don't deal with difficult situations. You don't deal with difficult situations. Nevertheless, yeah, difficult situations can arise for whatever we want to call this. Let's call this the character. All I can say to that is that whatever happens, happens. It's too unpredictable to say anything more than that. I mean, I'd love to give some kind of like rules or guidelines from the kind of lofty perch of the seeing of non-duality and so on. But I can't do that. I mean, I probably could if I was a guru. But then if I was a guru, I'd be wearing a robe. So we know I'm not. It's too, all I can say is that something will happen. Something will always happen. There's a difficulty and there'll be a response. If I kind of pay attention to what I think is maybe or probably underlying this, the spirit of the question, maybe it's something like, well, if this is seen, is the response to difficulties likely to be different? With caution, I would say, yes, it probably is. Because although there are no rules about this, you'll find, maybe other speakers might say the same as well, although there are no rules about this, there's likely to be maybe, I mean, for example, some reduction in neurosis, perhaps. So in which case we could say, well, when a difficulty arises, maybe the way it's dealt with might be less neurotic than it was before. Maybe, but we need to be cautious because, as somebody else has also said, this is living life with the blinkers off. You know, this is really living life in the raw. So in some ways, if we're looking at this as a way out of difficulties, I would say, yeah, probably best to forget that. I mean, that's the sort of stuff of the teacher or the guru who is beckoning you onto a spiritual path. Come on, come on, come on, follow me, follow me, follow me. I'll give you mantras, I'll give you techniques. Your life will then become easier. This is not about your life becoming easier. It's about the seeing that there is no one who has a life. So dealing with difficulties will unfold in whatever ways it unfolds. You know, it might be easier, it might not be. This is living life in the raw. You know, this is not a recipe for comfort. In a way, it's a wonder that anybody should seek this. But of course, nobody who seeks this can possibly know what it is that they're seeking. So anyone, you know, when I was seeking this, anyone who's seeking this is seeking an illusion. It cannot possibly be known what this is as long as there's someone there seeking it. Of course, it's natural to think, well, you know, I'm seeking something here and, you know, if I find it, I'll get some goodies from it. Well, firstly, I will never find it and you will never find it. And secondly, if it is found, there'll be no goodies from it in that sense.
Beautifully said. One more question, so I'll get to William and Magdalena. This one is from David Wow. Why would I talk about non-duality with other people, mainly when I had a few drinks, if there's still a sense of separation here, glimpses aside?
Why would you? I've no idea. But if you've had a few drinks, maybe that's why. Try talking about it to people when you're sober for a change, maybe. I don't know. You know, all I can say is, you know, I mean, why does anybody talk about this? You know, there's the problem with why questions is they always invite an answer which is a story, so we need to be very careful. So I'm not going to kind of construct an elaborate story here. I'm just going to say, well, you know, for some of us, some of the time it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun. Now, you know, I'll add to that. I don't know whether I'm being unfair here or not, but I'll add to that. You know, if somebody gives you a more pompous answer to that question, why do you talk about non-duality? And I hope you know what I might mean by a more pompous argument. Well, I'm doing it for the salvation of mankind, you know, or to make the world a better place, or to save the world from itself. I would run a mile from those people. I'll absolutely run a mile. You know, anyone who says much more than, well, firstly, I'm not talking about it, but talking is happening. And secondly, well, it can be kind of interesting and kind of fun. It's not going to get anybody anywhere. It's not going to do anybody any good, but it's kind of fun. If anybody, you know, says much more than that, I'd be, you know, I'd be a bit cautious about that. I want to throw something else in here, actually, because this came up the other day. I mean, there was there's kind of, I might have referred back to this before. Some of you might have been aware of an event in London some years ago called Dream Bus Live, which had many non-duality speakers at it, of which I was one. And it was very apparent. I was there for about half of it, you know, watching, listening to people, giving a talk myself. It became very apparent to me very quickly that the audience had more or less sort of split down the middle. And it's like, it seemed to me, this is my interpretation anyway, it seems to me like half the audience were there kind of to hear this, you know, kind of to hear this. The other half were there as the evangelical Christian equivalent of non-duality seekers. They were evangelical non-duality seekers who were desperate to get the word of non-duality out into the world in order to save it. And it was really, really clear kind of division between, you know, the audience at this event. Well, okay, if you want to be a non-duality missionary and get this out there as a way to save the world, well, you know, good luck to you. This is fresh in my mind. This happened several years ago. This is fresh in my mind because I happened to be at a non-duality meeting last week, and that exactly the same split was in the audience then. So I think it must be something very, very common. Very common. It's like half the audience there wanted to use this to save the world. Well, if you want to do that, good luck. You know, let me know. You know, I don't know. Come back in 6 months' time and let us know how well you've done. You know, this can't be used. This can't be used. You know, as Tony says, you know, this is not a bit or something like this. You know, this is not a business deal. You know, the individual is a businessman, always looking for, you know, what profit can I get out of this? There's no profit to be had out of this. This is just happening purposelessly, without motivation, without goal. It's just happening. And I'm going to throw in one last thing. All the purposes, all the goals, all of those things that the mind so loves, they are stories that the mind has made up. There's nothing wrong with them. Absolutely nothing wrong with them, but they are just stories. They're just narratives that the mind tells itself.
William.
Hi, William.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm enjoying my gin tonight. Thank you. Yeah.
Nice. What I wanted to ask about is, obviously, I love this message, and I don't, like you said, there's no way of knowing what this is about when the person drops, but there's some sense of longing or resonance. But at the same time, when I'm listening to you talk, the fear in my body is extreme, and it's the fear of not knowing. And it seems like as an individual, there's just a constant need to predict what's coming next and what will happen if I say this, what will happen if I do that. It's not so much a question, but would you be able to say anything about that?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is that you say it's the fear of not knowing. You don't know that. That's an interpretation. That's what the mind says. Oh, this is a fear of not knowing. And somehow in saying that, you've kind of labeled it, and maybe it feels a bit, you know, it may or may not be. I have no idea. I mean, fear is fear. Fear is, you know, physical. It's visceral. You know, beyond that, no, it's unknowable. It's unknowable. I'll say a bit more. I mean, this is a very threatening message to the ego. The mind, you know, the ego does not want to die. This could get quite complicated, because somebody might come on in a minute and point out that I've often said the ego doesn't exist. Well, it doesn't. You know, the ego doesn't exist, but nevertheless, there's a kind of energy there. Call it ego, call it mind, call it whatever you like. You know, and although it isn't real, it doesn't want to die. If that sounds paradoxical, I can't help it. It's just, you know, as close as we can get. So it may be that, you know, it may be that. So let's say there's a magnetic attraction there. So there's something in that energy that does want to die, that recognizes that this is a place where it might die. Yeah, there may be something in that energy that recognizes that its death is the only possible solution to the dilemma of being a person. But also there may be another energy. I mean, it's the same energy, of course, but manifesting in a different way, you know, which we could call the energy of the mind or the energy of the ego or whatever we like, which, you know, equally desperately doesn't want to die, because it knows that, you know, this, then it's all over. You know, it's all over for the ego, and it doesn't like the sound of that at all. It might be that. There's no way of knowing. That could equally just be a story. That could equally be a load of cobblers. We can't, in other words, the bottom line is that it's unknowable. That it's unknowable. And there is something important about this, because ultimately, you know, when this is seen, even if it's only kind of partly glimpsed, the unknowability of it is part of the beauty of it. And it's part of the relief. Over and over and over again, you will hear people say that, you know, there is relief when this is seen, or even if it's just glimpsed. And that relief might be about, you know, several different things. But I think partly it's that, just even the mind, and I mean, most minds are really kind of stupid around this. That isn't an insult, you know, to anybody. My mind is really stupid around this. But, you know, even the mind can kind of get that if it's really recognized that this is unknowable, there are no answers to the big questions that the mind likes to ask. Once it really gets that this is unknowable, then that can be quite relaxing. That can be quite relaxing. The mind can go, oh, now I don't have to worry whether I'm going to go to hell if I worship the Catholic God or the Protestant God. I don't have to worry about that because it's unknowable. It's just a story.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask was, a few different speakers have said to me, speakers of this message, it's not what I think it is. So, and you've said, I've heard on YouTube videos as well, that this can be quite a shock. I guess I'm constantly projecting images or pictures or visualizations of what it would be if there wasn't someone there. But it's completely, there's no way of even though there's been glimpses, there's no way of me getting a reference on what was actually seen in the glimpse.
No, it can't be what, you know, the me, the I, the ego, whatever you call it. I mean, you know, it lives in this world of ideas and experiences, and this, what we're talking about here, is neither an idea nor an experience. So there is no way that the I, the ego, the self with a little s, whatever, can get any kind of handle on what this is. This is why over and over again you'll come across different individuals who describe the seeing of this as a shock. It has to be a shock. Everything it's kind of, you know, obvious, tautological really, you know, everything that the eye's ever experienced, it has experienced as an eye. This is the disappearance of the eye. So it's not an experience that the eye has. It is the disappearance of the eye. So there's nothing there, and, you know, to have an experience. And yet this goes on, phenomena goes on. How weird is that? So this is unimaginable. This is unimaginable. And I mean, for anyone out there who, I'm sure there are, you know, plenty of people out there who, like me, you know, maybe followed spiritual paths and had spiritual experiences or transpersonal experiences or non-ordinary experiences, whatever, you know, whatever we want to call them. Really, all the mind can do is relate what we're talking about to those. You know, this must be some sort of spiritual or transpersonal or non-ordinary experience. No, it isn't. It's none of those. It's kind of the most ordinary thing in the world. It's just the disappearance of the one who experiences. Everything that this thought, I mean, I was a spiritual seeker for years, everything that this thought about non-duality, about this, every interpretation it put on it, it had to come from you know, a position that somehow, you know, if this was ever seen and when this was ever seen, you know, there would, you know, there'd be someone in here seeing it, and there'd be a kind of transmutation or a change out there. I mean, whatever. I wasn't naive enough to think that necessarily everything would be glowing with golden light. Maybe it would, or maybe it wouldn't. But even without thinking about it consciously, that had to be the interpretation that there's something in here and it's going to experience life completely differently when this is seen. No, nothing like that. No, life just goes on being life. It's experienced as completely and utterly ordinary when this is seen. What happens is the disappearance of the one who sees it. That cannot be imagined. It can't be tasted. It's just impossible. It's one of the reasons this communication is hopeless, and yet, you know, and yet we somehow still have fun doing it, some of us. It's mad. This is mad. Madness.
Absolute madness. Thank you, Richard.
And it's an affront to everything that the mind likes. It's an absolute affront.
Yeah.
You want to, if you moved like I have in sort of, you know, fairly spiritual circles, you know, among, you know, friends and people, you know, who are sort of quite into sort of spiritual things and so forth, you know, you want to upset them, start talking about this. That'll do it.
I haven't had any real spiritual experience before. I mean, I've read a few books about it, but I never tried any spiritual stuff before I came into this. So, yeah.
No, I just threw that in because, you know, I mean, maybe it's changing now, but, you know, because, but often there is you know, often people who kind of eventually find themselves washed up in the graveyard of spiritual seeking known as non-duality. Often, like me, they've had a kind of fair few goes round the spiritual funfair. I mean, a lot of people haven't, but often they have. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
Magdalena, please go ahead.
Yes. Hello, I just wanted, I don't have any questions because they have died already. My questions have that. I have been attending Tony Parsons talks for some years, several years. And then I came across of your book about tea and cake, eating the cake, drinking tea, something like that. And we have some exchange per email some years ago already, but somehow I didn't. Well, I'm living in Switzerland, so also it's a little bit more difficult to come. And now I've got the link from Emerson. Thank you very much. It's just kind to send it. So I decided to just pop up, and I'm enjoying. It's really nice. I feel that. Yes, and thank you very much. And maybe I pop up more times, but it's a little bit a stupid time for me because it's already 8, and usually we will have our supper and things like this. So we'll see. But thanks, and I enjoyed it.
Good, thank you. Thank you.
I love the Pope. Wow. I'm originally from Poland, you know. Exiling in Switzerland from Catholicism.
Oh, right, yeah.
Well, no, not really, but it's just fun. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Magdalena. I have a few questions here from Facebook and YouTube. There's so many here. Okay. This is from Yoshi. My issue is not separation, but issues life throws up that cause anxiety and stress.
Mm.
Did you want to comment on that?
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. That's the nature of life. Yeah. Anxiety and stress. It may be the nature of life. It probably will be for some of the time. Yeah. I mean, what can I say? You know, there are things that the apparent individual can do which, you know, might help to alleviate anxiety and stress, and we all know what they are. In a way, there's no point rehearsing them here, but, you know, get outside in the green spaces, psychotherapy, you know, I mean, gin if it floats your boat. I don't, you know. You see what I'm trying to get at? Yeah, this is the kind of the weft and woof, I think the phrase is, of everyday life, and you know, and it can be painful. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in a sense, one of the challenges for both the speaker about non-duality and the listener about non-duality is, in a sense, you know, there is nothing from this to be said about that. It's frustrating, you know. The person asking the questions wants, not necessarily in this particular case, but in general, you know, wants solutions and answers and help, and that's all completely natural. And the person sitting in the chair is quite likely to want to give solutions and help and answers, and that is also, you know, completely natural. And one of the frustrations of this communication is that's not what this is about. You know, this communication is not helpful. It's not on that level. It's not. There are many, many people out there, you know, giving, I'm not sure what to call it. Well, offering help on all sorts of levels. But this communication doesn't do it. You know, this communication says it might be seen that there's no one who has anxiety. It might be seen that there is no one who suffers. What help is that to the one who feels himself to be suffering? Probably none whatsoever. And yet something happens that, I'm going to use the word drags because it just popped into my head. Maybe it's the tiger's mouth metaphor again, that drags some individuals to this communication. And the only other thing I can add to that is that if I think back in the story of time, you know, Richard as a character, if I think back into that story some years ago, I don't know, 20 years ago or more, that would very much have been, you know, my story, that there was a character suffering from, you know, all sorts of things, you know, anxiety, stress, all sorts of tremendous difficulties, who found himself dragged somehow to this communication over and over and over and over again, even though it was useless, even though it offered no help. Don't forget, I am the man that came up with the ultimate mantra, helpless, hopeless. I can't remember what the third phrase was myself. The third word was myself. Meaningless. I am the originator of the great mantra. Helpless, hopeless, meaningless. I am helpless. It is hopeless, and this is meaningless. I mean, now there's a mantra to get us slitting our throats, isn't there? And yet somehow, if it's heard in the right way, whatever that means, that's not what it does. If it's heard in the right way, it's wonderful. I can't explain that, but I do know other individuals who also hear it and have heard it in that way. So yeah, I too came to non-duality meetings feeling stressed and anxious and hopeless and in pain and suffering and all sorts of angst and so forth. And, you know, these bloody meetings, they were no bloody help at all on that level. And yet something here kept bringing me back. So that may be what's happening for you. Smell the sweet breath of the tiger on your neck as you're dragged to yet another non-duality meeting, hoping for help from it, which isn't going to come. And yes, in spite of that, the next one, you may be dragged there as well. And at some point, it may just be seen that for all the suffering, there is no one in the center of that suffering. This isn't about an end to suffering. This is about seeing that there is no one who suffers. That's not a comforting thing to say. It's not meant to be. It's just a description. This isn't meant to be comforting or discomforting. It's really just a description. It's nothing more than that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. That mantra actually comes up quite a lot in meetings. People repeat it. Jason, go ahead, please. Maybe Jason did that.
No, I didn't do that. Hi, Richard. Hi, Emerson. In the intro, you mentioned something about free will and arguing in a bar about free will. And I know in these meetings, a lot of time people will join in and they want to argue about free will and whatever. I don't want to argue about free will at all. I want to get rid of free will. It's like, it just seems to create so much anxiety and regrets and, oh, am I going to do the wrong thing? Am I going to choose the wrong thing? Or the regrets of, oh, I chose the wrong thing. I did the wrong thing, la, la, la. So it's like, if I really had free will, I would just give up free will. But I don't have the choice to give up free will. But, you know, there's this belief in it still. But it just seems like such a burden. I don't know. Anyway, I felt like I just wanted to get that off my chest somehow. So I don't know if you have more to add to that or not, but thank you for listening.
It's interesting you call it a burden. I agree. But of course, to many individuals living, let's say, in separation, it's regarded as the greatest gift, the holiest gift of all. And to challenge free will, it can be a tremendous insult, a very, very quick way to start an argument, if not a fight. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I totally grok with what you're saying. Actually, it's a tremendous burden. Yeah. And what you're expressing is, I've quoted before, I think he's an English philosopher, Galen Strawson. He says, I know there's no such thing as free will, but when I walk down the street, I can't feel that. I'm unable to feel that. And of course, that absolutely, you know, if there's the feeling there, it goes with that solid feeling that I am a person. It's absolutely, and you know, the mind can tell itself as much as it likes. You know, there's no possibility of free will. I mean, we don't have to go to non-duality for this. You can deconstruct free will through logic very, very easily, or you can deconstruct it through neuroscience. It doesn't make any difference to the feeling as I walk down the street. You know, if that's there, it's there. Yeah. Yeah, it may be one of the reasons why perhaps life, you know, there's no promise in what's being said here, but nonetheless, just as a description, it may be that when this is seen, life is worn a little more lightly. And that might be one of the reasons, because free will does not, you know, is not such a heavy cloak and such a heavy burden when it's been seen through. Yeah. Of course, it's not that there isn't any free will. I mean, you know, you can disprove free will through philosophy and logic if you want to. But what's being said here is not really that there's no free will. What's being said here is there is no person. And so free will, in a sense, becomes irrelevant. You know, it's not what's being said here. I mean, I'm quite happy to say there's no free will, but that's not really what's being said here. What's being said here is there is no person who can exercise free will. Yeah. And by the way, I don't know how weird that sounds, but there's an awful lot of neuroscientists out there that agree with that statement now. So however weird it sounds a great deal less weird than it did 100 years ago in the story of time. Yeah.
Well, if I could get rid of the burden of the person, I would choose that as well. It doesn't seem to be a choice.
There's no choice. I wish there was. No, there's no choice about that. There's no choice about anything. It sucks in some ways.
Okay, thank you.
Are you in your car, by the way? Are you
Pardon
in your
me?
car, Jason?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Yeah, I hope you're not actually driving, are you? While you're...
No. I'm parked. Don't worry.
Good. Health and safety and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no one driving. William, please go ahead.
Richard, so Tony, I've heard him talk quite a bit about a contraction of energy that's in every cell of the body. And I've heard other speakers say that the sense of self comes out of that contraction. And I was speaking to someone just before this who speaks about this communication, and he was saying, the sense of me isn't the contraction. He said there's the contraction of energy out of which which is like a position. And out of that sense of position comes the sense that I am here, or I am that contraction. Well, maybe you wouldn't say it like that, but what I wanted to ask about is it only really when that contraction leaves the body that the sense of I am goes with it? Or would you not distinguish it like that?
I'm going to be a bit cautious here. I might regret giving this answer. This has come to, I would just answer a very simple yes to that. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't really kind of follow what you're quoting what somebody else said, which is a bit,
yeah.
I didn't really follow it, so I wouldn't like to comment on it. I mean, we're all groping around anyway, we're all trying to F the ineffable, as I've often said. I think I borrowed that one from Alan Watts. We all try and say this in different ways, and none of it's correct. But in essence, I would say what you just said at the end there. Yeah, that it's like there's a sense of contraction, and when this is seen, there's a kind of, I want to say there's an explosion out of that, but that sounds perhaps a little bit overly dramatic. Yeah, it's often what I come back to is kind of my own and equally pathetic as anybody else's, because we're using words to attempt to describe this. Like it's a lot of contraction. Yeah.
I suppose the contraction,
what that is, and if I can describe it in any other way. The only other ways I can describe it is using metaphors, which I won't do tonight because I've done that plenty before. It doesn't, all I can say is, when it happens, it's known.
The reason I kind of asked that is because when there's a glimpse, obviously there's no one there registering that something's happened. Like I remember looking back to some glimpses, there was not a certain point of recognition something's changed. I mean, there was an obviousness that this was what was always being looked for, but there wasn't a sense of something's really changed differently. But then coming back, say the next day or whatever after that glimpse, there was kind of like, it felt like there was something totally different. And then after listening to this message, I could make sense out of that sense of me wasn't there. But the me always seemed to come back.
Or just interrupt there and say that it sounds like that something energetic happened. From what you're describing, and that's that we are talking about, again, many people have said this many times, we're talking about an energetic shift. We're not talking about anything that has to do with ideas in the mind. Ideas in the mind might change, or the story in the mind might change, might not change, might go wild, might not, but that's kind of irrelevant. We're talking about an energetic shift which has nothing to do with the mind.
Right, yeah.
Although it is likely to affect the mind.
Well, the thing about the mind is I'm still trying to work out why does the me keep coming back, because I'm trying to work out what's the difference between that and then when the contraction's completely gone. And it doesn't matter if, well, not that I could find an answer that would satisfy me, because then but even if there was a satisfactory answer, it wouldn't make a difference knowing what the difference is when the sense of me seems to return versus, I have to use the word liberation because I can't think of any other word, when there's no longer the sense of self returning.
Well, if an answer did come which would satisfy the mind, that would probably satisfy the mind for about 36 hours at the most. I mean, this is what keeps the mind going. I mean, it makes it so apparently powerful. It's not really powerful, but I mean, you think, some minds are able to spend sort of 75 to 80 years, wondering whether the transubstantiation of the host is a metaphor or literal. Does the wine and the bread literally turn into the blood and flesh of Christ, or is it a metaphor? I mean, that can keep some minds going for 80 years. That's how powerful the mind is. Once it gets a bone to gnaw on, it's just what the mind does. It'll go on doing its thing. Well, meanwhile, this explosion out of localization or contraction can happen at any time to anyone. Whether they non-duality meetings or not.
That was the biggest thing I kind of realized when I started listening to you, because you were one of the last speakers I came across. And I started watching. Well, I heard a lot of good things about you from some of the other speakers, so I thought I've got to check out Richard.
All right, okay.
I started watching all your YouTube videos, and one of the things that I noticed you mention more than the other speakers is this fact that it's completely acausal. When you shared examples in some of those videos about someone who hasn't come across this and suddenly they're not there, and
right, yeah.
and then I really realized it's got nothing to do with listening to this or not listening or whatever it is, or having an awareness that you want liberation or not.
Yeah. Again, this is another insult to the mind. Maybe this is the evening for not insulting the mind, but for noticing that a lot of this is an insult to the mind. That's another one that, the mind obviously lives in a world of cause and effect, which also, of course, means justice and, justice, cause and effect. This is seen because it is deserved. Because my karma has been purified, or because God shines His light especially on me because I'm especially holy. It's a real insult to the mind, that this can hate causal. What are you talking about? I mean, it just overthrows everything. I have written in and I've said in other places, this overthrows all authority. Forget it. Forget authority. Holy books and the stories of the priesthoods where what comes to us is deserved by our own, we reap the fruits of our own doing, whether through God's benevolence or through karma, one or the other. This is a real insult, to suggest that. I mean, obviously, in my case, I deserved it, but not anybody else. It's an insult.
Yeah. Well, the thing is,
people get. I mean, people who are invested, in the kind of stories of spiritual paths or religions can get very, very angry about this communication.
Yeah. Well, even in regards to what Jason...
To me, I've been insulted in live meetings by Buddhists. Not often.
I was going to say, even in regards to what Jason was saying about free will, even if there was cause and effect, which clearly there isn't, that would still assume then there's a person who can choose to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So either way you look at it, there's nothing that could be done about it. So...
Well, as I often say, it's worse than that. There's no one who can do anything about it. That takes it a stage further back. It's not that there's nothing that can be done about it. There's no one who can. There is no one. Simple as that. But in a way, also, none of that matters because what happens, happens. So if there's a character there who is drawn to doing something, whatever that might be, whatever it might be, we all know the kind of things. I mean, if there's a character there who is drawn to doing something, then that's quite likely to happen. That's fine. That's okay as well. I mean, this gives the ultimate permission, if you like. There's no one who needs permission. There's no one who can give it. But nevertheless, in a way, this is the ultimate in permissiveness, if you like.
Yeah.
It's all okay. Meditate, don't meditate. Chant mantras, don't chant mantras. Go to therapy, don't go to therapy. There's no one, that's all simply what's happening. Could say it's all oneness doing its thing, if you like.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get this right, but then on the other hand, you can't get it wrong. So it's, you know, at some point, and I feel the point has come now, at some point in any talk I give, I find myself saying, so you might as well relax. If you could, you know, I'm not suggesting there's anyone who could do that, and nevertheless, relaxation might happen. And if relaxation happens, again, to quote myself, I'm quoting myself too much tonight, but to quote myself, if relaxation happens, then that may be a great blessing. It may be the greatest blessing. It may be the greatest blessing there is for relaxation to happen.
Okay, thanks very much, Richard.
Thank you so much, William. Nonduality scholar. Just a moment here. Eric, please go ahead.
Hi, Richard. How are you doing today?
Hello, Eric. Hi.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you. Talking about how
You're cutting out, Eric. You're frozen.
Irrelevant to the mind, and not to say that. Oh, I'm frozen. Can you still hear me?
Now it's good.
Missed the first part. Yeah, go on.
Okay. I appreciate you talking about how this doesn't touch mind, or mind can't touch this, and all expressions are this. It allows one to basically, not that there is anyone that can do this, but I've noticed that there is a slowing down. Am I frozen again?
We keep losing you. Yeah, we got
okay.
You notice that there's something about slowing down there, then we lost you.
Well, I will leave it at that. And I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate your talks.
Thank you. It's good to hear that. Thank you, Eric.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Eric.
No, I can't notice, you know, oh, the spiritual background. I just can't resist that. Namaste. Too many years spent following the guru.
There's a couple of questions here, Richard, from the interweb, from YouTube. This one from David Elaine. Hi, Richard and Emerson. Love and greetings from us both. Good luck, Richard, to you and Don with the start of the live meetings. Hope to get to see you both sometime soon. Hey, Richard, this is from Robin Starbuck. When encountering mental and physical anguish, can we simply focus on our empty fullness and inseparableness to regain our freedom?
No. How would anyone do that? No, I wish. Oh, I wish. You know, I hope that didn't sound harsh when I said no like that. It would be so wonderful if we could. How can anyone focus on empty fullness? Empty fullness is what's seen when there's no one there. As long as there's someone there trying to focus on it, it can't be seen. I'm sorry. I wish I could give another answer. Empty fullness is only seen when I'm not there seeing it. Yeah, I have to leave that one at that.
Yoshi asks, what about consequences of actions?
Yeah, what about them? This is hell, this is, to the individual. Obviously, yeah, actions have consequence. Of course they do. Of course they do. Well, in terms of, like, you know, let's say, you know, nature, natural existence, cause and effect, you know, within the dream of time, you know, then of course actions have consequences. If I throw this glass of gin over my head, I'll have a, you know, wet hair. Consequences, of course, cause and effect. We live, you know, we live in a story of stuff unfolding. Not a very elegant word I managed to find. I don't know why it took me so long to find the word stuff. We live in, you know, a world of, you know, stuff unfolding in time, in which, of course, cause and effect and consequences are part of the appearance. We then turn that into usually a very complex, very important story in our mind, which only exists, you know, as an abstraction, as an abstract story that, you know, therefore, you know, because of cause and effect, and then out of that come all the sort of religious stories and the spiritual stories, all to do with cause and effect and karma and pleasing God and stuff like that. So it all becomes, you know, and doing good and doing ill and all of that. But that is, I'm sorry, that's all just stories that the mind spins to keep itself entertained, to keep itself occupied, and to keep itself in control. After all, if I'm talking as the mind now, if I spin a story that I have a purpose on this earth, this planet, and that purpose is to please God, you know, then I have an entertainment for life. I have something to keep me going for life, or until the dark night of the soul hits me, of course. So as far as what we're communicating here, I'm sorry, that all just goes, whoa. It's another insult to the mind. What are you telling me? That, you know, consequences of my action aren't important? What about karma? Come on, Richard, you used to go to Buddhist meetings. You know about karma. Yeah, it all just goes blown away like sand in the wind. It's awful for the mind. It's terrible. All there is this. How often have we heard that? That's not a Richard original statement, as you probably know. It's just this. It's just what's happening. No past, no future, no time, no cause, no effect. It's awful for the mind. It's terrible for the mind. But in another way, it's kind of also rather wonderful. It is in a way the root out of the mind's torture as well. It's kind of very paradoxical. I mean, hearing this message, it's not a message. Hearing this communication, it's kind of torture for the mind. It's also might be the mind's root out of its self-imposed torment. All of this is metaphor because, of course, the mind doesn't even actually exist. We're talking just about an ever-changing thought stream.
This question from Yoshi. What are the best non-dual techniques for freedom from the self?
Oh, well, firstly, I don't give those out publicly because they're very secret. They're very powerful if they fall into the wrong hands, and you have to pay a lot of money for them. Not in any way because I'm money orientated, but to prove your sincerity. So that's really all I can say on that one. When you've sent me a large enough check, I will reveal to you the secret about which you ask. Yeah. Will that do? I can't go any further into that one, obviously.
I think that technique is 50% on sale right now on nonduality.live.
But there you go. Apply to Emerson for a discount.
For a discount. Does this have any impact?
Do what you like. No, I mean, no, do what you like. It won't be you doing it, but if you're drawn to something, do it. You know, I mean, you know, techniques can be wonderful if you find them wonderful. They can be torture if you find them torture. If you're drawn to something, well, I'm saying if you're drawn to something, do it. I should really be saying if you're drawn to something, you may well find yourself doing it. Well, there's a clumsy way to speak. I mean, I can't get much more dualistic than saying you may find yourself doing it. But, you know, hopefully you kind of get the spirit of what I'm saying. Yeah. If you're drawn to something, do it.
There's a question here from Chiragacharya. Does this have an impact on the body? Like the heartbeats get slow as there is immense relaxation?
That last, I'm going to ignore the last bit, the specific about heartbeats. I have absolutely no idea, but I mean, I can't give a definitive answer to the first part of that question, but my guess is yes. It's just a guess, you know, because we're talking about, as I've said before, we're talking about, you know, going from contraction into, I just use the word openness, if you like. I think if you, I mean, I can't be sure, but I think if you talk to quite a lot of characters who talk about this or where this has been seen or whatever, there'll probably be a sense that, yeah, there's more. I mean, I talk a lot about relaxation. And don't try and pin me down too much about what I mean by that, because I might burst into tears if you do. But certainly within that, yeah, there's something physical. Yeah, relaxation of a physical nature is quite likely to be part of, you know, part of the. So I'll be trying to be really careful about what words I choose here. Part of the experience, which is experienced by no one when contraction opens out, when localization is seen through, when the self is seen through, if you like, or drops away. Yeah. It's likely to be less, you know, contraction. I don't mean something as simple as physical tension by contraction, and yet that is somehow contained within it. Yeah. I think we better stop that one there before I'm declared a heretic by the Nonduality archbishops.
This question by John: do you think non-duality is the biggest scam in the human history?
I mean, obviously, I'm tempted to say just yes, just for the shock value of it. But no, I think religion is the biggest scam in human history. I haven't dipped into it, but I haven't had to. But I have my hat of questions here. The one
please go ahead. Yeah.
Hat of questions, and I know. I mean, I don't fix this. There are simply some random questions in there. I pick one out at random if I need to. But I know there is one in there about religion because I was sort of, you know, looking around in the hat earlier. No, this is kind of like the opposite of religion. And if you want me to explain what I mean by this, I probably could, but we might be here till, you know, 10 o'clock tonight, British time. But no, I think religion's the biggest scam in history. And this has nothing to do with religion. If you want me to expand on that, you'll have to ask me another. You probably don't, but if you do, you'll have to ask me another question about that.
There's another question here from John. So the problem is physical body and contraction in the nervous system. So is the problem the physical body and the contraction in the nervous system?
No. If that was the problem, I mean, I'm a little bit reluctant to accept the definition of this as a problem, because you could say that, you know, until this is seen, then contraction seems to be the natural state of being. It's not a problem. It seems to be the natural state of being. When this is seen, then it's realized that, if you like, this is actually the natural state of being. But no, the problem, I mean, if the problem was in the physical body, we could probably go to a yoga class, release the tension, and that would be all that would be necessary, maybe. So there was some other part of it in there as well I've forgotten. The physical and something else, was it?
And contraction in the nervous system.
Well, that's a bit too abstract, the contraction in the nervous system. But again, I'd be tempted to say no. No, this is something, it's something evanescent and ineffable. that's quite annoying, because if it was a contraction in the nervous system or the physical body, there's probably something we could do about it. I mean, when I'm physically tense, there's something I can do about that, apparently. No, it's not. We can't pin this down in that way. It's the ultimate mystery, this is. Actually, if you think you can describe this, then you probably know you're wrong. Just as when I try to describe this, I know that I'm wrong. I know I'm missing it. I'm just trying to get as close as I can, but as close as I can is still a million miles away.
There's a couple more questions here. We're running out of time, so there's tons of questions on YouTube.
Well, we were going on till 1 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Oh, that's right. That's right. It never ends. Yeah. That's a secret, though. That's just for, for people that have paid the secret entrance fee. Yeah. Chirag asked, do you mean that the me never goes? What goes is the desire that me should go?
No, that's not what I mean. I can't put this terribly clearly, because again, it's a metaphor. I mean, the me is actually a metaphor. I mean, the me doesn't actually exist. What's it a metaphor for? Well, the closest I can get to it is that sense of contraction and separation, which goes along with all the stuff I was talking about in perhaps my overlong introduction. A sense that, I'm a person and I have, meaning in my life and free will, and I live in time and all of that. No, that the me is just kind of part of that. I've forgotten the question now.
I'll repeat. Do you mean that the me never goes? What goes is the desire that the me should go.
No. You can't. If the desire for the me to go arises, you can't get rid of that. You can't get rid of that. It might disappear with the me, the sense that there's a me. Yeah.
Jade added, the sensation of the person, uncomfortable or narrow, is like any other sensation. Anger arises or appears and naturally goes.
I would say not. No, I wouldn't agree with that. I would say that it is the kind of core. The word sensation isn't a good one, but it'll have to do. I would say it is the core sensation that all the others seem to belong to. That's the difference. The sensation of anger seems to belong to me. The sensation of hunger seems to belong to me. The sensation of love seems to belong to me. The sensation of jealousy seems to belong to me. That's the difference. The me is like that central, it's that central core. That's why it's not easy to describe the sensation of anger, but it is kind of possible. I don't think it's even possible to describe the sensation of me. I try it with words like contraction and so, but that doesn't make sense until it's lost. To say that the me is a sense of contraction makes no sense to anyone until that contraction disappears. Then it does make sense, only through the recognition of its loss.
This one is from John. Are we programmed meat robots?
That's come up before.
I've seen this question before.
Recognize that from last time.
Yes.
I think that people should be penalised if they can't be bothered. No, it's a lovely description. I do recognise it maybe from the last meeting. I'm not sure. It's a lovely description. Are we programmed meat robots? No, because we're not programmed, we're not meat, and we're not robots. Apart from that, it's a good description. Entirely accurate, except every word of it is wrong. If you like it as a metaphor, everything we say about what we are is a metaphor. So if you like that as a metaphor and it works for you, then have it. I like the metaphor, the divine puppet. It's a little bit more romantic than a meat robot, but of course it's highly misleading. The divine puppet wears divinity.
That sounds like a good rock band name. The Divine Puppets. Yeah. This
I
one
mean,
is
it's very misleading because a puppet implies a puppeteer. So, you know, if you want your meat robot, have it. That's fine.
Shira goes, "Hi, Richard. What makes one thought different from another is the content of the thought. After liberation, the content of the thought no longer remains important." Want me to read it again?
Yeah.
Hi, Richard. You
yeah.
got it?
Do the first part first, then stop.
Sure. Hi, Richard. What makes one thought different from another is the content of the thought. After liberation, the content of the thought no longer remains important.
Well, it may or it may not be important. I mean, it probably won't have as much importance. And I suggest that there are a lot of thoughts that will become very unimportant, probably, you know, and those are the thoughts that give the story meaning. It's probable that the thoughts that give the story meaning, like, for example, you know, I have a purpose in this life, and my purpose is to bring heathens to God. I mean, there's a thought, quite a big thought. It's pretty obvious that if this is genuinely seen through, then, you know, the content of that thought will probably disappear. You know, but then other thoughts like, you know, I'd like a cup of tea now. There's no reason they should change. I mean, thoughts, after all, are simply oneness thinking. One of the kind of things that tends to happen, I mean, on some spiritual paths, all thoughts can be seen as kind of a, you know, bad thing, you know, naughty person, slap your hand for having a thought. And then on religious paths, certain kinds of thoughts might be seen to be bad, like, you know, oh, you know, I really fancy her as she walks down the street. So, you know, because, you know, spiritual paths tend to be redolent with meaning, and religious paths tend to be redolent with meaning. When this is seen, and it's seen that everything is equally and gloriously meaningless, then in a way, you know, the content of the thought can't really be good or bad or important or unimportant. It's just whatever's happening, whatever is arising. It's just oneness thinking. I fancy her. I'd better save that heathen for God. I want a cup of tea. It's all the same, really. It's just oneness, having thoughts.
This one is from Zoom user from Zoom. Most speakers of non-duality say nobody would want this. If it was possible, would you return the illusion of feeling separate?
No, I'm not aware. I mean, I'll just have to take that as read. I'm not aware that most speakers on non-duality say nobody would want this, except in the sense that, you know, you can't want it. If you are somebody, if you're a person, right, you can't want this because you can't know what it is. But to me, that's all that would mean. To say that nobody would want it would just mean that. I mean, to take it in the more kind of obvious and literal sense of, you know, I don't know, the speaker saying, "Oh, this is terrible. You know, please get me back to where I was before." No, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, you know, so all I can say is that whoever says that, you need to kind of go back to them and ask them what they mean by that. I mean, as an act of good faith, I will deal with that, the last part of that question. I haven't kind of queried the premise, you know. Yeah, just to take, you know, without being kind of too smart, you know, smart about it and trying to make some non-duality point or whatever, just taking it absolutely innocently, that question. No, I wouldn't want, I wouldn't want to go back. I, who do not exist, would not want to go back in time, which does not exist, to my previous experience, which I didn't have and which also doesn't exist. So I hope I've covered my non-duality bases there, but also given a kind of, you know, straightforward answer. No, because this is, I'm not making any comment at all about, the quality of life, as it is lived now. I'm making no claims, no comments on that whatsoever. It's just the relief of the end of seeking.
It's kind of like someone calling Tony and asking Tony, can you turn me back into a me?
Yes. Yeah. People do come to this message, this communication, and go away from it again because they recognize that it's a threat to their stories. And I mean, I've quoted this before. A friend of mine took somebody to a meeting, and afterwards they said, but I like my stories. And lots of us do, of course, but then a lot of us, we're just, we have separation sickness, which means we are sick of separation. We can't really know what that is, but we know we've got it without being able to know what it really is. And we want an end to it. That's maybe one of the reasons we're prepared to sit through meetings like this, no matter how frustrating and aggravating and anger-making they might be.
I think this is the last question, John. There's a lot more questions, but we only have time maybe for one more question. If the brain is useless and life is an automatic show, then why is there something in our heads as a brain?
I don't think I've ever said the brain is useless. No, so, I have no idea what that would mean. If somebody out there has said the brain is useless, you need to ask them that question. That's the first part of the question. What was the next part?
Then why is there something in our heads called a brain? If life is an automatic show, then why is there something in our heads as a brain?
Well, I'm not going to get into the kind of metaphysical shenanigans that often goes on around this about, but is there a brain? We don't know there's a brain. I can't see a brain right now. I'm not going to, go down that road. All I'm going to say is I think two things come to me. One is it's another why question. And I mean, why question, I'm not criticizing this at all. It's just, I'm just pointing out that why questions always invite a story. They can only ever be answered with a story. So if I did give an answer to that, it would only be a story, and anybody out there could sort of then challenge it with another story. And then the only other thing that comes to me is I feel like saying, well, try living life without a brain and see where it gets you. Have your brain removed, see what happens, if you like,
For a fee, we can do that for you. Richard, would you offer a brain removal?
Thank you. I've said before, this is many years ago. I was at a non-duality meeting run by somebody else. I'm not going to say who it was. And there was a discussion started firstly about whether the books on the bookshelves had words in them, because we couldn't see the words until we opened. Did the words magically appear? And then it went on for about another half hour about whether there was a sort of, a back to somebody's head because you could only see their face, and then whether there was a brain inside the skull. I mean, if you like that sort of thing, fair enough, it passed the time. But I'm not really very interested in questions like that. Like I say, try removing the brain, have a trepanning, remove the brain and see what happens.
Well, thank you so much, Richard.
My glass of gin is almost empty, so we have to stop.
Yes, we have to stop now. There is a brain removal and other techniques of enlightenment coming up on Saturday with Don and Richard. I'm just joking.
It's very adventurous and it's very exciting, and it's also extremely painful at times. And that pain we could sum up, if you like, in the one word or the one phrase, that we each live with a sense of separation. So the suggestion from here is both a very simple one and also one which is really difficult or maybe even impossible for the mind to understand. the suggestion here is that that sense of separation or duality or two-ness, living in a separate world as a person, that sense can simply collapse. And if it collapses, then we could say what is revealed or what is seen is what we're here to talk about tonight. What is seen then is non-duality. And just as duality means two-ness, non-duality means not two. Oneness, if you like, or more accurately, not two. So the suggestion here is that the apparent duality of me living in a world with choice and free will and purpose and meaning and a past and a future, that can simply collapse. And if it does collapse, then all that is left then is the recognition, if you like, that that adventure of duality was always a kind of illusion. It was always, it was kind of real in a way, but it was also unreal. And that we could say more fundamental to that or underlying that, what is simply the case is there is simply everything that is apparently happening. And that includes the appearance of a character here called Richard and a character there called Emerson or Kate or John or William or Elizabeth or whoever. So there's an appearance of a character here, but the suggestion from this chair here is that the personhood of that character can be seen through. And if it is seen through, it may be, it doesn't have to be, but it may be one hell of a shock, because if the personhood is seen through, if the kind of reality of the individual is seen through, it will tend to take with it all sorts of things that the person will have greatly valued up till then, like meaning, purpose, goal, the importance of the past, the importance of the future, the idea that this is somehow on a journey, maybe a meaningful journey, maybe not, but on a journey from birth to death. So there tends to be a collapse in meaning, purpose, and also, rather fundamentally for a lot of people, just the whole idea that there is somebody here who has something very, very precious called free will, which they are able to exercise. So that can also be a tremendous shock for, you know, this individual to have felt that to some degree they have been able to be the author of their own life. You know, I have been able to make choices about my life. You have been able to make choices about your life. That perhaps most catastrophically of all for some individuals, that can simply collapse. And it can be seen that this was always, if you like, without meaning, without purpose, without choice. I remember using words very like this at a live meeting once, and somebody just looked at me from the audience and said, "Richard, that is one of the most depressing things I have ever heard." And as I apologized to them for being so depressing, they said, no, it's great as well. So by a person who feels themselves to be living a meaningful life, this may be heard as depressing. It might be heard as a shock. There's a very, very strong tendency for this communication to be rejected by a lot of individuals. If any of you in this audience have tried to start a conversation with a random stranger in a bar, you know, if you've gone up to a random stranger in a bar and said, you know, you don't exist as an individual, you might have come across some of that resistance. So this is often heard with a great deal of resistance. And yet the suggestion from here is that even a split-second glimpse of this reality can just change everything. And that when it's seen, nothing can ever be the same again. So that's my kind of pitch, if you like. That's my introductory talk. Now, before the recording started, I had a brief conversation with Emerson, and Emerson knows something about the situation here which nobody else does, which is that I come to these meetings these days, because they're on Zoom rather than live. I come to these meetings these days with what I call my magic hat full of questions. It's a genuine, real hat, and the questions in it are genuine questions in the sense that they're questions that people have sent in to me over, you know, many years of my giving talks and writing books and so forth. And there's a special request for Emerson before we throw this open. He asked me just to select a couple of these questions at random and have a go at answering the questions that I've posed, other people have posed for me, but, you know, I've kind of got here. So I'm going to, Emerson's in control, so I'm going to accede to this request. I'm going to give into it. And I don't even know what they are yet. I haven't looked at them. I just picked a couple of pieces of paper out of the hat before the meeting started. I'm feeling that in about 10 seconds time, I might bitterly regret agreeing to this, but nevertheless, here goes. Let's have a go. Okay, so there's the piece of paper. The first question is there a mind? If not, what are thoughts? Okay, I got off lightly with that one because I think that's a fairly obvious and a fairly common question to come up. Is there a mind? Fairly simple answer, no. No, there is no mind. There may seem to be a mind, and we could say that's just what it's like to be apparently a person living in separation. One of the great shocks that may be seen when separation is seen through is that I do not have a mind. Not only do I not have a mind, there is no me who could have a mind. In any case, you do not have a mind. I'm not being insulting there. I'm simply saying you do not have a mind. And indeed, even worse, there is no you who could have a mind. So the question goes on, if not, what are thoughts? Well, thoughts is energy thinking. Thoughts is, we could say, oneness thinking. And it's because of the thought stream, we could say, that there seems to be a mind. You know, we could say that for most of us, not all of us, but for most of us living in separation, the kind of flow of thoughts is so strong, is so powerful, is so energized that it creates a kind of impression that there's something solid behind it. And we call that thing that seems to be behind it the mind. And it is one of the shocking things when this is seen, to realize that, you know, I do not have a mind. I have never had a mind. I cannot lose my mind because it did not exist. But what there is this thought stream, this which includes impressions and sensations and feelings. So, yeah, there's, for Emerson, that's our first hat question. And here's the second one, because I was asked to do two. Oh yeah, this is interesting. A teacher has told me that until I stop over intellectualizing about all my experiences, I will never realize liberation. Do you think this is true? Okay, so again, there's a very simple answer to that. No, absolutely not. No, it's the sort of thing that teachers say. And it's one of the reasons maybe it's quite a good idea to be wary of teachers around this stuff. If anybody calls themselves a teacher of non-duality, I would probably head in the opposite direction from them, you know, fairly quickly. This can't be taught. If I had something to teach about this, I would be doing it, and I would probably be driving a much, much more expensive car. You can't, just as you can't, how can I put this? Just as you can't, as it were, bring the seeing of non-duality on, neither can you do anything which will resist it. So any instruction or injunction that you get from a teacher or a guru or from some kind of spiritual path or from a religious teacher or whatever that says that you must do this and this and this and you mustn't do that and that and that, I would say, no, just ignore that. It's just, you know, if anyone sees themselves as a teacher, then they have to teach. And if you teach, you have to give instruction, and you have to give the instructions in such a way that whatever happens, you will come out smelling of roses and looking as if you're right. So not over-intellectualize as much as you like, it won't be you doing it. In other words, over-intellectualizing happens or it doesn't. Over-intellectualizing stops or it doesn't. Usually when a teacher of non-duality or spirituality, whatever we want to call it, usually if they do teach things, they'll have a kind of fail-safe in there whereby they'll be able to blame you when it doesn't work. And they'll be able to blame you by saying something like, you didn't try hard enough, you weren't pure enough, you weren't dedicated enough. In other words, here's me with my teaching, now it's your fault that it didn't work. Give me a bit more money and then maybe we can adjust it so it will work. I'm just going to throw in one more little thing here and then I'll stop and throw it open. I was actually watching somebody, I was watching somebody being interviewed a few weeks ago, and they kind of invite people to learn what I will describe as a fairly simple self-inquiry practice from them, and they were making what I would consider to be huge claims for this, about how this would kind of almost inevitably bring about the seeing of what we're talking about here. And one of the things they threw into their description of this is that the most important characteristic in the seeker who is doing this practice that they will invite the seeker to do, the most important thing is determination, is their determination. That is the most important thing. Now, when I hear something like that, my hackles rise. I don't have a lot of hair left, but I feel like pulling some of it out. I'm very resistant to that kind of message because it feels to me like that is typically what, you know, the teacher, the person who sees themselves as a teacher will do. They will put some sort of characteristic on you and they will say, you know, that is the most important thing. So therefore, if the practice which is being given to you doesn't go anywhere, it's your fault because you didn't have enough determination in this case. It could be determination, devotion, sincerity, desire for truth, whatever that is. It could be any of these things, but you know, I'm very, very wary of any communication like that. No. When the teacher tells you to be more devoted, to stop over-intellectualizing, to spend more time meditating, to whatever it is, I would say, no, let's just ignore all of that.
Thank you, Richard. We have a whole bunch of questions here coming from Facebook, from Nonduality Live, YouTube, Nothing Media, YouTube. And the first question from Facebook is what is seen just God in quotation? Is what is seen just God?
If you like, if that works for you, fine. Yeah, I mean, call this whatever you like. Call it oneness, call it nothing and everything, call it unconditional love, call it custard if you like. If God works for you, well, fine. it may depend on, you know, our individual culture and so forth. I tend to avoid that word. I think particularly in a Western tradition, it's very, very difficult to separate the word God from ideas and beliefs which are absolutely and totally and inescapably dualistic. And so I don't tend to use that word. I mean, if the culture you're coming from or your associations with the word God maybe have more to do with, you know, with the Eastern traditions, and maybe the Buddhist tradition, although in Buddhism they tend to avoid the word God as well. They tend to, then, you know, that might work for you. The problem in the West is that if you think of the Abrahamic religion, if you think of, I mean, mostly, you know, Christianity and Islam, an absolutely core, an absolutely fundamental foundation stone of most of the interpretations of those religions is utterly and eternally dualistic, because the concept is that there is God who can be approached and can be worshipped, but can never be, as it were, merged with. I mean, if you look into the, you know, the more mystical traditions of Christianity and Islam, that may not apply, but for all intents and purposes, from a Western perspective, it's really difficult to disassociate the idea of God from absolute, total dualism, absolute duality. There is you and there's God, and the best that you can do is to be allowed to approach God and worship God, but never to merge. However, having said that, all I'm really saying there is that those kind of references don't work for me, so I tend to avoid them. But if they work for you, that's absolutely fine. I'd be absolutely fine. And I meet people who those kind of reference points they do work for them, and they value them, and, you know, that's great. I think I'd just like to sort of add, you know, in case, yeah, there's a kind of subtext there. I think what I'm trying to say also, you know, you can't get this wrong. I mean, if you ask me a question and I kind of go, oh, blah, 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 I really don't like that, it doesn't make it wrong. You know, you cannot get this wrong. I mean, you can't get it right either. You and I can't get it right, but we cannot get it wrong. One of the things that I frequently say in my talks and meetings is that if there's any possibility of relaxation, then relaxation is great. And maybe hearing that we can't get this wrong might produce a little bit of relaxation. We don't have to try at this, because as we can't get it right or wrong, we might as well relax.
Thank you. There's a question here from Facebook, from YouTube, sorry, from Mark Harris. Given all you have said, why talk about it? Has it collapsed for you, Richard?
First part of the question, why talk about it? Why not? That's all I can say. There's no reason to talk about it whatsoever. There's also no reason not to talk about it. I hope it's not going to sound contradictory if I now go on to say that with or without a reason, some of us simply enjoy this. So if you kind of want a reason, so I am now going to contradict myself, and say, well, because for some of us, some of the time it's enjoyable. Another way of putting that is simply there's no one here talking about it. There's no one there listening to it. There's just an energy that arises, you know, non-duality for no reason, somehow, sometimes seems to like to hear itself talking about itself. That may sound misleading because it sounds as if I'm personalizing something, but again, it doesn't matter. Being misleading doesn't matter, because being misleading is no less helpful and no more helpful than not being misleading. There was another part to that question, was there?
Has it collapsed for you, Richard?
It doesn't collapse for anyone. No, it hasn't collapsed for me. It doesn't collapse for anyone, because there isn't anyone. I mean, all the clearest way I can put this is simply it's seen or it's not seen. And if it's seen by no one. So no person ever sees this. No individual ever sees this. Richard has not seen this. Nevertheless, it may be seen.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments here, and I'll get to William and Eric in a moment. David and Elaine goes, hi, Richard. No questions are arising, but wanted to say hello and always lovely to see and hear you. Love from us, both you and Dawn.
It's lovely to hear from you as well. Lots of love to you both. We're looking forward, hopefully, to some live meetings in the fairly near future.
There's a whole bunch of people here saying hello. There's greetings from Anders and Dan. Go ahead, William, and unmute yourself.
Hi, Richard.
Hello, William.
I don't have an explicit question, but I just wanted to talk to you. It feels to me like there's nothing else other than non-duality, like nothing else will ever work. But the thing that I find so frustrating...
Sorry, can I just interrupt and say non-duality won't work either? It's not, you know, we want something, you know, we want to, it's natural that we want to get something from this. You will not get anything from this. This is not as Tony sometimes puts it, you know, the self is a businessman and this is not a business deal.
I think the problem with that is I'm not disagreeing with what you've said, but it feels to me like I am getting so much from this. And it is a roller coaster, like this, like awful devastation that happens. But when there's a resonance or an openness or a glimpse, I guess the me claims that, like, this is happening to me. I'm getting some relief here.
Sure. Yeah, sure. That's natural and fine. Not a problem, is it?
No, but then I want to see what you're saying, which is I won't get it, which I can't make sense out of that.
You will never... You can't. It's worse. I mean, I feel like fairly okay. The next thing I'm going to say I feel okay about, the one after that, no, I'm quite happy to sit here and say you will never see it. You will never see it, William. Give up. If only you could give up, but you can't. But the next thing I'm going to say is, you know, I haven't seen it. I don't see it. Richard does not see it. Nevertheless, it may be seen. And that is a mystery until it isn't. I mean, when it's seen, it is still a mystery. It's the biggest mystery of all. It's the only mystery in town and outside the town because it's everywhere as well. But nevertheless, you know, you will not see that mystery. I have not seen that mystery. No one, I mean this in both ways, no one will ever see this mystery, but I hear that the other way as well. You know, no one will see this mystery. No one will see this mystery, but no one will see this mystery. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Completely. Oh, well, I get what you're saying.
There's nothing here for William or Richard.
Well, the thing I was going to ask was when you were saying that I won't get anything from this, or you said non-duality won't work. What I was going to say is the thing that's so frustrating about this is that it's impossible to predict what's going to happen or where this is going to go. Like, you sometimes quote Ramana Maharshi about the head in the tiger's mouth, and you've got no idea if the tiger's going to be playing around with you or bite your head off straight away. And when this seems so intense, all the stuff that seems to be going on around that sense of me, I just want to know when it's going to be over. But yeah,
it's natural. I mean, that's what it's like to be, you know, that's what it's like to live in separation, to be an individual, to be a person, you know, whatever phrase we want to use. Of course, it's just absolutely. What can I say about that other than raise my hands and perhaps remember the great mantra, helpless, hopeless, and meaningless. You know, you are helpless, it is hopeless, and everything is meaningless. And how wonderful is that? Maybe that'll be heard as depressing, as some people hear it. Maybe it'll be heard as wonderful. And maybe, as the person who commented on that mantra the first time it came into this what isn't a mind here, maybe it'll be heard as both depressing and wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, of course, we can't help living in a story. You know, the individual lives in a story, and it's pretty obvious. You know, just sit down in front of, you know, in front of EastEnders any night or whatever. You know, it's obvious we want to know what's going to come next, and what's going to come next, and then, and finally, is he going to get the girl, or, you know, die in a blaze of glory, or, you know, it's just natural. It's what it is to apparently be human.
Thanks very much, Richard.
Okay, William.
Eric, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Eric.
So I've come across this idea recently, repeatedly, that, well, at first I heard of it in the reference of, to meditation, where sometimes in meditation we try to seek a stillness of mind, but other times in meditation we become aware that all contents of mind are it, so-called, like there's no avoiding any of what arises in mind. And to kind of generalize that to life, and what we're talking about here, I have had this feeling like anxiety and depression and anger and jealousy, all of those emotions, I don't want to accept them as part of the me. But with this idea, all of those emotions and everything else in between is all a part of the experience that arises. And there's no ownership of it. It's just a part of totality. And yeah, I find that this allows me to sort of not wrestle with it a little bit, but I also feel that it's fleeting. Like I'm working with a couple of guides who try to help me see this, and I get glimpses where I feel a release of this like sense of the me, but it comes back and it looks at those emotions that I don't want, and it notices that they're present, and it says, well, this can't be it. And I just notice this loop of wanting my life to be a constant, a state of constant bliss or something. And I'm trying to rid myself of that, I suppose you could say.
You're trying to rid yourself of
this desire for life to be a state of constant bliss.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as long as you're trying to rid yourself of that, then that's going to go on happening. I mean, you know, it's possible that instead of that, a state of relaxation might occur, or it's possible that a state of relaxation might occur, you know, some of the apparent time that seems to be passing. But ultimately, you know, if it makes sense to the individual, it makes sense to the person. You know, I'm suffering, I don't want to suffer. Of course, you know, bliss is lovely. Even the slightest glimpse of bliss is lovely. So, of course, why shouldn't I want to have more of that? Of course, it's absolutely natural for the person, the individual, of course. But it's possible that, you know, that can be seen through, and then it's possible that it might be noticed that what arises is simply what arises. Some of it's more pleasurable, some of it's less pleasurable.
Yeah, and would you say that once that is seen, there's simply a not taking ownership of that which arises?
You mean when this is seen, when separation's seen through?
Yeah.
There are absolutely no rules, none whatsoever, but there are tendencies. And so what I would say is, yes, there's quite a strong tendency for what you just said to happen. In other words, the sense of ownership is likely to collapse or diminish or lessen. and feeling. Since you mentioned anger, did you mention another feeling? I can't remember.
Anxiety, jealousy.
Yeah, so let's call that fear. Let's sort of, go for the heart of it and call it anxiety, fear. So uncomfortable feelings like sorrow, anger, and fear. They may diminish, but there's also a tendency that in a way they can get stronger because they can become more raw. One of the things that you could say that the separated person is very good at is kind of damping down the full force of feelings and turning them into what I call and some other people call sort of like a more neurotic version of themselves. So, and the problem with neurotic versions of anger and fear and sadness is that they tend to kind of perpetuate themselves and last for a very long time. So like a neurotic version of anger would be irritation, say. A neurotic version of fear would be anxiety. And the problem with irritation as opposed to anger is it can go on for a very long time. I mean, I've come across people in my life, probably most people watching this may be able to think of somebody who seems to be capable of staying irritable for days, weeks, months, and sometimes even years on end. It's very, very difficult for somebody to stay angry for days, weeks, months, or years on end. It's just too much energy. And so sometimes what happens is that there's a kind of a loss of neurotic energy when this is seen. And so instead of experiencing these kind of attenuated feelings like irritation or anxiety, for a long time, we just get a much briefer period, if you like, of the full force of that feeling. So feelings can actually, including uncomfortable things, can become stronger when this is seen. And that can, that can sound like something that the person doesn't want, but actually, if that happens, it turns out to be something that, oh yeah, actually, yeah, maybe I'd rather settle for 5 minutes of anger than a week of irritation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So rather than with effort releasing my control of this and allowing a process of liberation to unfold, it would more be like the constricted energy simply dissipates of its own accord, or it doesn't.
Yes, absolutely. And I can't paraphrase what you just started with there, but as you were saying, I was thinking, well, the obvious comment to make on that is you can't do that anyway. So you don't really have that choice that you just put to us, which I can't paraphrase because my memory's not good enough, but you don't have that choice anyway. Right. What will unfold. But however, if as a result, that's a really dangerous phrase for me to use. If just out of nowhere, that energy system happens to kind of, become more relaxed about letting whatever the feelings that are there flow in a kind of natural way, that's much more bearable. I mean, that's an insight which is shared with, kind of quite a lot of good psychotherapy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Richard. I appreciate it.
Okay, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. I have a whole bunch of questions here from YouTube. The first one is from Dan Shaw. Dan asked, can you explain why emotions are only experienced in my reality? Therefore, there exists a separate viewpoint that is unique to individuals.
No, I can't explain that. It's a really obvious and natural question. It's a question that comes up, a lot. It's a really natural question for the mind to ask. The mind is very, very, very good at coming up with, objections to this. We could say that, a lot of minds, I was going to say most minds, a lot of minds are pretty terrified of this communication, because really, if what's being said here is heard, it absolutely dethrones the mind. It really does. It overturns the mind. It actually reveals the mind for what it really is, which is a complete illusion. As I've already said this evening, there is no such thing as a mind. There's just a kind of flow. A flow of thoughts, perceptions, sensations, and so forth. So some of the things that are said here, they are absolutely and totally insulting to the mind. They are counter-logical, completely counter-logical. There is no way they can be justified to the mind. The only thing that I can say in defense of non-duality, not that non-duality needs my defense, of course not. You know, the only thing I can say is that what is being communicated here is an attempt at a description. It is not a rationalization. There is no way that I can justify intellectually or rationally what is being said here. And believe me, sometimes that pains me as much as it pains some other people. You know, I mean, I've kind of got a fairly intellectual background. I've sort of, read some books, and, I kind of, value the mind. I value the intellect and all of that. And, when I as a worn out spiritual seeker first came across non-duality, I mean, I found a lot of what I was listening to a real insult to the mind. And I came up with some pretty clever questions, to challenge this. And those pretty clever questions got me precisely nowhere. I used to use this image, I'll throw it in, it may make sense to some people. I used to sort of ask questions about this, and I felt like I was kind of climbing up a mountain, and I was banging a peg into the mountain. That was my question. And then I'd hear the answer, and the answer would allow me to haul myself up a little bit higher up the mountain of knowing or not knowing. I don't know how to put it. The mountain which would eventually get me to, the seeing of non-duality. And the problem with this was that I'd bang the peg in by asking my question. The answer would come back to me. The peg would fall out of the mountain, and I'd just fall on my arse back to the bottom of the mountain. No matter how many questions, I can't even begin to calculate how many hours after endless hours of non-duality meetings I sat through. And after all those many hours, I was still precisely at the base of the mountain with my arse hurting and my mind hurting, and I couldn't work out which was hurting more. So statements that are made here and in other places where non-duality is talked about, like there's no person, there's no mind, there's no mind, there's no space, there's no time, there's just this. No. The question's an obvious one. I'm sitting in my room over here asking this question. You're sitting in your room over there answering it. What are you going to say about that then, eh? How does that work? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You follow the mind in this, and it will lead you, I don't know whether to say round in circles or through a maze for the rest of your life. In 60 years' time, your mind can still be arguing with this, or the mind might just go, okay, I surrender, I give up. I'm not saying the second of those possibilities is any better than the first, but it is more relaxing. And although seeing non-duality isn't like anything, if it were like anything, it would be like relaxation. I've lost count of the number of times I've said that. Even tonight, never mind, over the last however many apparent years.
I have a question here from Kane. Hi, Richard. In this story, how many apparent people have fallen away from your communication?
I have no idea. And that would be very, very much a story, because of course nobody falls, no apparent person ever falls away anyway. And of course they don't fall away through my communication. They don't fall away through the Shaktipat of some mighty guru. They don't fall away from this or that or the other. But nevertheless, in the story, stories like that do appear. And so from no one, out of nowhere, yeah, I receive emails from people, and people ring me up, or they come up to me at meetings and they say, you know, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, I was reading this book, you know, or I was sitting in a meeting or watching a YouTube, and it might be the apparent me, or it might be, you know, somebody else that they name or whatever. Yeah, of course that happens, and these are stories, and you know, yeah, it's nice to hear them. Yeah, it's lovely in a way, but really there isn't any answer to this question, because of course nobody ever sees this. Nobody collapses. Nobody falls away. But stories around that, you know, are delightful. Yeah.
There's a couple of comments here. There's one here saying, there's just so many of them. You talk beautiful, Richard. Cheers.
Oh, thank you.
Rupert Spira must hate you.
I don't even, well, no, I was going to say, I don't know if Rupert Spira knows my name, but actually we did appear on a panel once, so he probably does.
And then someone commented, all there is pizza.
Oh, yeah.
And Yoso goes, there is no words meaning knowing, concepts, not even no thing.
Okay.
And then Andreas' comment, I don't know. I think the core of Christianity is non-duality, such as, this is a quote from John 14:20. On the day you will realize that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah. How long have we got? I would say that if you challenge me about this, I might break down, cry, and withdraw it. I don't know. But I would say that at the heart of all religion, there probably is non-duality. It is still detectable, even in the world's major religions today. It is still detectable in the esoteric forms. It's very, very, very difficult to detect it in the kind of outward exoteric forms. And one of the problems, this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine, so I really need to limit what I say about this. But of course, one of the kind of exoteric, the kind of, the sort of outward world-facing political versions of particularly the Christian and Islamic religions in their various forms, is that this is perceived, seeing of this, any kind of, I'm going to say any kind of mystical seeing as well, although I would not call this a mystical seeing, but any kind of mystical seeing as well is seen as a tremendous threat to the kind of outward forms of Christianity and Islam, which is why if you look at the history of those major religions, they have actually put quite a lot of effort into killing people who've seen this, or killing people who have a mystical apprehension. I think that's a bit of a clue that they don't really like this conversation we're having here. There are, pretending that there's such a thing as history. There have been plenty of times in history when we could not have had this conversation, not without being burnt at the stake. And pretending for the moment that there is such a thing as geography, there are plenty of places on the planet today, right at this minute, where we could not have this conversation without being probably killed, actually. Let's not mince our words. So in a way, it's a great blessing that we live pretending that there are these 4 dimensions, 3 of space and 1 of time. It's a great blessing that we are living in a time where we can have this open conversation, I hope for all of us, and definitely at least for most of us, without any threat to our lives. This communication, you know, is incredibly threatening to the kind of outward forms, the exoteric forms of religion. Why is that? Well, I shan't talk about that for the 2 hours I could. I'll just say something very brief. You know, hopefully it should kind of be obvious, you know, that the seeing of this, what we're talking about, it can arise spontaneously at any moment, in any place, for any apparent individual. In other words, it requires no priests, no imams, no bishops, no popes, no cardinals, no churches, no holy books, no tradition. None of that. If all of that was swept away, if there was some kind of catastrophe, you know, tomorrow, whereby all holy places, all holy scriptures, all history, all knowledge of any holy happenings in the past, if all of that was wiped out tomorrow, the seeing of non-duality would simply arise spontaneously. This doesn't need anything, it needs nothing to support it, no foundations whatsoever. You know, this is actually the foundation of everything else. You could say that the exoteric, I may regret the sentence I'm about to say, but because it's popped into my head, I'm going to say it. You know, you could say that non-duality is the foundation, you know, for all religions, and that what happened is that religions tend to take this understanding or this seeing and then pervert it and turn it into something which can be used for profit and for power. Going back to, you know, what I was saying earlier about, you know, what other speakers say about how, you know, the ego, the self, the individual person is a business person, is always looking, you know, where can I make a profit? How can I make a profit out of life? We could say that's what the churches and the temples have done with this seeing. They've taken it and they've turned it into something that they can make a profit from. Okay, there's something about this meeting tonight which is bringing out a certain naughtiness in me. I hope I don't go away and regret this later, but if I do, it's too late anyway.
It reminded me of our interview, the one that will never be released.
Oh, right. So maybe
yeah.
Maybe this tonight will never be released either.
It's live right now, Richard. You have
it's being
streamed live.
Very enjoyable naughtiness, Richard.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a bit late to roll back on this now, isn't it? We're just going to have to plow on.
There's a question here from Kane. Can you talk about when Tony said, "I hope you die soon"?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, I was. What was happening for me is what quite often happens for people. You know, there can be a kind of glimpse of this. We haven't gone into this before, but I think, you know, I just throw this out there. If anybody wants me to expand on it, I will, but I'll just leave it simple for now. There can be a kind of 2 different kinds of seeing with this. There can be what's often called, what I call, other people sometimes call, the seeing of emptiness and the seeing of fullness. So there can be like an event in which the seeing, or the emptiness of everything, including the emptiness of this, is seen. And it's a pretty big shock. And the seeing of the fullness of this is not, you know, is not apprehended. I'll come on to that later. If the emptiness of this is seen, but not the fullness, it can leave behind it a person who is in despair. I won't go into why that is at this moment. I will if anybody wants me to, but I'll leave it at that for now. Just take that as read. There's lots of cases of this. Lots of people get a glimpse of this, and then there's a sense of despair. So I was in that period of despair for quite a long time. having, let's say, seen the emptiness in everything. And I was, going along to Tony's meetings, and I was ringing him up and, asking for help, which of course is never forthcoming, because nobody can ever give anyone any help with this. No matter how much some of us may pretend we can, no one actually can. So I'd ring Tony, and he'd be very kind and listen patiently and so forth. And then I'd buttonhole him in tea breaks and after the end of meetings and so forth. And one day I went up to him at the end of the meeting, as usual, in this state of emptiness and despair. And he just gave me a big warm hug, and he just said, "I hope you die soon." And in the context, I mean, I think I knew what he meant. And in the context, I think that probably at least some, if not many, if not all of the people watching this now also know what that means. He was like, he could see in me what I know so many other people experience, just the pain of carrying around the burden of being a person when you've had even the slightest glimpse of being free of that. I mean, the slightest glimpse of being free of that is so delicious, and then after it, there is just this kind of pain, this constant fatigue and pain of still, as it were, carrying around the burden of being a person when you've had a glimpse of freedom. And it was just, I just take it as, that was Tony's very kind way of wishing me well. The best anyone can do with this is wish us well. So yeah, and occasionally, actually, I got an email 2 or 3 days ago from somebody asking me if I could pass on the same blessing to them. So yeah, so for anybody who would like to die soon, I hope that happens.
Thank you so much. I think Michael was up earlier, and then he didn't. I'll get to you, William. Hi, Michael. Michael Markham. There he is. Hi. You're muted there, Michael.
Yes, you're muted, Michael.
Oh, I thought I had that.
No.
Unmute myself. Okay,
you're unmuted right now. You're good.
Oh, good. Is it your belief, Richard, that consciousness / awareness arises in the brain of sentient beings?
I think you started that sentence by saying, is it my belief that?
I did, yes.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is it really doesn't matter at all what my belief is. Beliefs are just beliefs. Who cares? There's a character here, there's a character there are lots of other characters. Maybe, I hope there are a few other characters at least watching this, and all of those characters will have beliefs. And if this has been seen partially, or if this has been seen fully, it doesn't really make that much difference to that. There'll still be beliefs, they probably won't be held so strongly. So the first thing I want to say is that on that level, in a sense, what we're talking about here is trivial because it's just belief. Having said that, the question you ask, I find very interesting. So it's nice to engage with it. So, and having given that little preamble, of course, I've forgotten precisely what the question was. So let me just check. Are you basically asking me whether, the scientists and the philosophers sometimes put this, that mental activity or the mind or consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the physical brain, and that's it? Is that what the question is?
Primarily, yes. I maybe should have phrased it. It is your brain. Is it your brain's belief, or the brain that you used to think of as yours? Is it?
Let's keep it simple. I mean, basically, does consciousness arise from the physical brain, and is it entirely explained by the existence of the physical brain? When the physical brain dies, consciousness dies. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, let's tackle that one. How long have we got? Okay, Emerson, we can stay on. Just had a message from Emerson saying we can stay on till 2 o'clock tomorrow morning. So that should just
yeah. All day, 24 hours.
The obvious answer is, of course, it's unknowable. It's unknowable, and we could just leave it at that and say, well, it's unknowable, so who cares? However, you know, like many people, I do find this an interesting question, so I'm going to sort of add to it's unknowable, you know, what my best guess is, and my best guess is that the answer is no. My best guess is that consciousness, mind activity, whatever you want to call it, you know, cannot be entirely explained, or will not turn out to be entirely simply a function of physical brains. So in other words, you know, I suspect that physicalism, as they call it, will turn out to be wrong. But, you know, who knows?
Do you have an alternative suggestion as to where the source might be for cognition, for languaging?
It's the same. It's the same as the source for anything. It's, you know, it's oneness, which is just a word to express. You know, ultimately, it cannot be divided up. Ultimately, you know, it's a great function of the mind to divide things up. It's wonderful. It's exciting. It produces lovely, you know, lovely phenomena and all of that. But ultimately, it's a play. Ultimately, it's a kind of play. Ultimately, there is no division. That's what non-duality means. No division. So I love playing with these questions, but it's also maybe to recognize the impenetrable unanswerability of them. Otherwise, we might end up getting a headache.
Is it possible for the objectifying brain to even ponder oneness when its world is composed of nothing but separate objects or imaginarily separated objects, me and other? Is it even conceivable that the brain could ponder such questions from an objectified perspective?
I'm not sure what you mean by from an objectified perspective.
Me and other, a subject and object world.
All right. Yeah, well, I'm going to take the brain out of this because I think that raises too many hairs that we could go chasing. And I'm going to talk about the mind instead, because that seems to me a more natural way of putting it. Or, you know, is it possible for the mind to, however you put it? Yes, of course it's possible to, because the mind, if you like, the brain deals in ideas. It's possible to do it endlessly, to speculate endlessly. It's not possible for it to actually reach any meaningful conclusions, which is kind of good in a way, because it means that the intellectual games and the mind games and all the kind of opinion conversations that take place can go on forever. Yeah, it's a great way of passing the time.
Isn't mind just another object in this subject-object world, just another adjective that the brain invents to articulate or try to capture or imagine its own rough brain chatter, the origin of its sense of personal identity? Mind has no, is just as ephemeral as any other object in this world.
Yeah, what I'm really saying is, you see, we're talking about something that doesn't exist, because you know, there is no such thing as a mind. What there is a flow of, let's call it, perceptions. There is simply, you know, you will have heard many, many times in talks like this, people saying things like, you know, there is only what is, there is just whatever's arising or something. That is an attempt to describe the fact that in a sense, I mean, even in the physical world, you know, the idea of objects is misleading. It's triply, quadruply misleading, if we talk about what we could call the mental world. So there is no such thing as a mind. It doesn't matter whether we regard it as an object or not. It doesn't matter whether in some way we are objectifying it or not. The fact is that neither we nor the mind exists. What there is an ever-changing, what? An ever-changing series of impressions, and some of those will be some of those are known as thoughts or thinking. And the word thought, you see, one of the troubles with language is we have all these damned nouns, and the problem with the noun is it's names and objects. So I say a thought, it sounds like I'm naming an object. I say, oh, I have a mind, you have a mind, it sounds like I'm naming an object. I'm not. There is no object called a thought. There is no object called the mind. What there is an ever-changing process arising in nothing.
Okay, isn't ever-changing process just another attempt to objectify or to grasp or to articulate this what we call ungraspable, but that's just another idea too. Isn't anything that
that's all we can do. That's all we can do. We're having a conversation. That's all we can do in this conversation. In a way, this meeting would be much, I hesitate to use the word truer, but I'm going to use it. In a way, this meeting would be much truer, if you like, to non-duality, whatever that means, if we didn't talk at all. If we just sat here and we didn't speak. I have two contentions about that, and I could be wrong about both of them. One is that there'd be fewer people watching it, and the other is it would be less fun. You know, why talk about this? Well, there's no reason to talk about this at all. But on the other hand, there's no reason not to. Why not talk about this if some of us find it fun? Some of us, some apparent people find it fun. Why not?
Okay, I do. I do think that anything that's conceivable is part of the consensus conceptual overlay, or commonly thought of as a dream. So anything within a dream, any conclusion, including the flow of separate things, is a misapprehension.
It's got to be a misapprehension, but that's okay. I mean, here is a dream character having a conversation with another dream character, and everything put into words. I mean, we use the word misapprehension if you like. It's a slightly harsh word, but it's okay. Another way of putting it a little bit more neutrally is simply that everything put into language is not the thing itself and is not the process itself. It can't be.
Okay, but that's another
kind of fun, isn't it?
It's
You're
fun.
not enjoying this, Michael?
I am tremendously. It's like, well, I can't describe it. But going back to this idea that anything conceivable is part of the misapprehension, including all ideas about it, assuming that there is an it, and someone to see it, someone separate to see it, that there's no way to what? I've come to that wall.
Because none of that applies. None of what you've just said applies. There's no it. There's no one to see it.
No.
You know, I mean, we are stuffed here. I nearly used a stronger word, but then I thought maybe it's before the watershed, so I won't. We're stuffed here, you know. We've got to be lost with this.
Yeah, I enjoy being lost. I enjoy this. And even this is an objectification of it, this profound unknowingness of never having any idea what's going to happen next, or I'm certainly not sure of the future because memory is plastic. So there's nowhere to settle into anything. There's no hooks. There's no... Yeah. But even that is an idea that's objectified. We're not going to get away from that. In a dream, everything is the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you're drinking a cup of tea or taking a sip of water, that's just as much of this as some highfalutin philosophical conversation about Advaita.
Yeah.
It sounds much more impressive if we use the Sanskrit word, doesn't it? Advaita, and now I'm expecting comments coming in saying, well, you're mispronouncing it.
It's pronounced it. Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. He can't even pronounce it, the proper Sanskrit word.
Oh, thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
There's a comment here from Earl Gibbs. The books Confession of a Seeker and I Hope You Die Soon are highly recommended.
Oh, thank you.
And there's William.
Yeah. Can I just mention, every time somebody buys one of those books, I think I get something like, 50 or 60 pence, and it mounts up, and pretty soon I've got enough money for a pint of beer. So yeah, I encourage you to buy them. Hello, William. You're mute. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, Richard. It was just a quick question about something you said earlier. You might have been joking when you said about how this meeting's bringing out a particular naughtiness and you might regret it later. Is regret possible when there isn't a sense of being a person?
Anything's possible. Anything is possible. So yes, regret is possible. However, the likelihood of regret diminishing when this is seen is high, and the likelihood of regret continuing as strongly as it did previously is low. But having said that, you see, you've got different characters anyway, so that you may have a character where this isn't seen and they experience no regret anyway, because they're called psychopaths.
Yeah.
And then you've got characters who may be highly, highly, highly neurotic. Well, that doesn't stop the possibility of this being seen. So a very, very, very neurotic character, this is seen. Probably there'll be less neuroticism after that, but there can still be neuroticism and regret could still arise. It's just less likely to arise. It's less likely to be held so strongly. But you can't say anything. What we're talking about here, it's not about... Somebody just mentioned the first book I wrote. There's a section in that book called The Stuff That Happens, and regret about actions arising would be part of that. It's part of the stuff that happens, right? So when this is seen, unless physical death occurs at the same time that this is seen, stuff goes on happening. Stuff still goes on happening. And anything that happened before could still happen. Anything that it's possible to happen could still happen. It is less likely, however, that regret will arise as strongly or as much once this has been seen. And it's more likely that it will pass through and cause less collateral damage on the way.
Mm.
I used to have I haven't used this image for a long time because it's a particularly foul image. I don't know why it came to me one day in a meeting, but it's like, you've got a kind of a room and there's fly paper sticking from the ceiling and the flies come in and they buzz around and they stick to the fly paper. So that's what it's like to be a person. The inside is very sticky, the thoughts come in, the feelings come in, regret, despair, self-hatred, self-loathing, guilt, let's pile it all in. They come in, they buzz around the room, and then they stick to the flypaper. And eventually the flypaper becomes absolutely encrusted with dead flies. That's a kind of image for a very, very neurotic person. You see, well, seeing this, it's like the flypaper is likely to sort of fall off the hook and disappear somehow magically. So the flies may still come in through the window and they buzz around and they fly out through another window. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does.
Oh, yeah. I think that's a great analogy. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Have we got any more questions out there?
Thank you.
Not,
yep.
Good.
Yeah, there are some questions that are coming up here. I'm just going to read them. This one is coming from Facebook. This is a comment. Helpless, hopeless, and meaningless. That's a good one. The trick is to recognize it as a piece instead of something boring.
What was the last bit?
The trick is to recognize it as peace instead of something boring.
Yeah, yeah, or something which is simply, you know, yeah, it's not a again, I don't, it's probably not a good idea to go up to a stranger in a bar and whisper that mantra in their ear. It's not a good idea. No. Wait till you get a sense that there'll be an affinity for it. Maybe practice it on cats and dogs first. Yeah, helpless, hopeless, meaningless. It's wonderful though. If it's kind of got in a certain way, it's so freeing. If there's no hope, we can relax. There's a film with John Cleese in it. I can't remember. I think it's called Clockwise. And he's driving himself frantic, chasing around, trying to, you know, do what he can to get the girl that he desires. And at one point he says, it's not the despair. I can stand the despair. It's the hope I can't stand. I really relate to that. You know, hope is a very cruel master or mistress, depending on your fancy. I mean, as long as there's hope, there's always something you should be doing. Come on, if there's hope, get off your fat ass. Get out and do something. Come on, meditate for longer, meditate harder. Do more yoga, do more Tai Chi, purify yourself. Clean up your diet even more than you're only eating 1 day out of 5. Well, how about trying 1 day out of 8? Come on. That's what hope can be like. You know, despair. Well, you know what it's possible to do in despair? Real despair means, you know, there's no sense of anything you can do about your predicament. You know what you can do in despair? Relax. Might as well relax because there's nothing you can do. And I've quoted, I think his name's Keith Dowman, so many times. The closest thing to relaxation is the closest thing to Buddhahood, here and now. I and other people are asked, what's this like? What is it like, this mysterious, not something, this mysterious nothing that we're talking about? What's it like? There's no way of answering that question. It cannot be answered. But the closest I could get to it is by saying, well, it's not like anything, but it is at least a little bit relaxing. So relaxation is the key to Buddhahood. Here and now, it may be easier to relax in despair than in hope. It's at least maybe worth thinking about that one.
There's a question here from Rupert.
Oh, by the way, that was a method. I really have to say that was not a method before I get lots and lots of angry emails. Yes, sorry, Emerson.
No worries. Rupert goes, it is so over already. Where and what is the seeking, and who claims they're to be seeking?
Oh, where and what is the seeking? Well, the where is the. I can't really make sense of the where. You know, seeking is simply a kind of an energy that arises. What is it? It's an. I'm going to call it an energy because to call it a feeling is misleading. It's an energy that there's something missing. It's an energy of dissatisfaction. I mean, in a lot of the talks I give, you know, I use the word dissatisfaction a lot. I hear other speakers sometimes using it. It's like, you know, one of the core characteristics of feeling like a separate person is dissatisfaction. You know, it's like there's a kind of nagging feeling that there's something missing. Actually, what's missing, of course, isn't something, it's nothing. It's the fact that nothing has not been apprehended that's missing, and it creates a feeling of dissatisfaction. And now I've forgotten what the question was.
I'll repeat it again. I lost the question. Just a second. It is over already. where and what is the seeking, and who claims there to be seeking?
Yeah, so the seeking is just an inevitable consequence of that feeling of dissatisfaction, which is just what it's like to live with that sense of separation. Yeah, and my memory is really shot. It was a 3-part question. I feel we've dealt with 2 of them. What was the third one again? The very last phrase?
And who claims there to be seeking?
No one. No one claims that. No one claims anything. All claims are made by no one masquerading as someone. So an apparent someone who feels themselves to be separate, even though they don't actually exist, claims the seeking. Which is why when separation drops away, the seeking drops away, because there's no fake person there anymore to claim it. Seeking arises entirely from the fact that there is felt to be a separate person.
And there's a comment here. I get that the mind won't make sense of it. It's just that Tony Parsons describes emotions just appearing apparently in experience. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, if I understand that right. Yeah, we could say yeah, of course, everything simply apparently appears. Everything appears out of nothing and falls away again, including emotions, feelings, these words that are apparently being heard. Yeah, everything. It applies to everything. Yeah, emotions, words, puppy dogs, and pints of beer, they all apparently arise and fall away again. Yeah.
This one is from Blue.
We kind of somehow turn them into something solid. You know, the sense of the separate person turns, everything that arises is fleeting, but the separate person somehow turns it into something that seems very solid. Even an emotion can seem, you know, hugely solid to the separated person.
And this one is from Blue Elephant. Love you. And
Oh.
Ariana would say, all that is ice cream. Just what's appearing. Just what's appearing. Just this. Smiley face.
Okay. If ice cream floats your boat, fine.
And then there's a comment here about the previous conversation from Andreas. Okay, yes, mainstream religions are very much duality. It's the esoteric versions that are non-dual. And then Dan said, Gnostic Christianity is rife with unity ideas. Did you want to comment on that? Gnostic Christianity is rife with unity ideas.
Absolutely. No, totally. Yes. Yeah, you want to really get the kind of heart of Christianity, you know, absolutely. Go for the Gnostics. However, having said that, I also want to say it's a bit of a kind of mixed thing, because there's also a huge amount of story in the Gnostic forms of Christianity, and some of those stories are they're so sort of mad that they almost make some of the stories in the actual canon look sensible. It's quite difficult to do that. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, at their heart, the Gnostic Gospels absolutely get this, but there's a hell of a lot of junk around that as well. Yeah. Anything else? Any more, Emerson? Is Emerson frozen? Ah. Hi, everyone. I'm not sure what's happening here. I can't see Emerson now, and everything, and the recording has stopped. So I'm not very techie, so I'm not quite sure what's happening. But anyway, should we just go on for a bit longer?
Sit there and chat.
Sit here and chat. Yeah. Is anybody who I mean, actually, we've been going nearly an hour and a half now, so we should probably wrap this up sort of in the next sort of 5 minutes anyway. But are there any last questions from anyone? I can't see anything that's on the written feed, so if there are any last questions, it'll have to be live. And if there aren't, I'm not quite sure what's happened to Emerson there. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was like maybe that was an intervention from God.
It says recording stop. So stop. Yeah. So now you can actually tell the truth.
But now I can actually say.
Yeah, you can reveal.
I can reveal
the absolute truth.
Okay. A little message came up there that said Emerson is the host now, but no, as long as it's not still recording. So, of course, okay, that was really all a masquerade, the real truth. Okay, I can't say it now, we're recording again. I was going to reveal.
Okay, sorry about that, Richard. There was a technical difficulty there, but I'm back.
You're back, okay. Emerson, that was because we weren't being recorded then. I was just about to reveal the real truth that underlies non-duality, but then the recording started again, so I had to stop myself.
Oh no, it's going to be released in the secret meeting.
Okay, if anybody wants to know the real truth I was about to reveal, then just send me a brown envelope full of banknotes, and I will. Write the truth back to you. We've been going for about an hour and a half nearly, haven't we?
Yes, yes. We have about 4 minutes left.
Okay, so maybe if there's one last 4-minute question or two last 2-minute questions. William, you've got your hand up again, yeah?
Yeah, it's not so much a non-duality question. It was just because it's just because you'd said that the live meetings might start again. I was wondering what that's likely. Is there a particular day and time and place where those are held?
Yeah, and we're hoping that in September, I mean, obviously this is very COVID dependent if the regulations don't change, but we're hoping that live meetings may start again they will start again if permitted, hopefully in September.
Okay.
So, yeah. And
the details will all be up on your website?
Yes, indeed. And at the moment, I can't remember the dates, but at the moment, Dawn has got a meeting scheduled for, I think it's the second Friday in September. And she has a meetup group where you can get the details. If you just put in Dawn Garden, non-duality into meetup, you'll get it. And maybe we'll do a joint meeting in the 3rd week of September. That will be a Saturday afternoon meeting in London. And yes, certainly the meetings will be on my website. And if you want to be on my email list, just email me and then you'd get news of any meetings anyway.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll join the email list.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to put in a little advertising break there. I'll send you your £5 later.
Okay, thanks, Richard.
I'll also post the website on the link on this video and also on the chat. Just a moment here. There's a few more questions here. We only have a couple of minutes left, so if anyone wants to question here, there's a... Is there any difference between a character and a cloud?
A character and a cloud?
That's right. That's the question.
I don't think I can answer that question. I nearly misheard it as, is there any difference between a character and a clown? In which case I'd say no, absolutely none. A character and a clown, that's too metaphysical for me. I can't do that one, sorry.